Luke Mathers, my brother from another mother. How the devil are you?
Good, mate. Really good. Good to see you.
Yes, two bald blokes in polo shirts doing a podcast.
Yes, what could possibly go wrong?
Indeed. Mate, so you have a very interesting background that involves spectacles and stress, right?
Yeah, there's bugger all interesting about a background involving spectacles, but yeah, I was one of the original directors of Specsavers in Australia. So when Specsavers came round, I went round and waved the flag and said, "These guys are good. Come on board." And we opened 100 stores in 100 days. It was the biggest retail rollout in Australia's history. It was huge, right?
What?
Huge. That they had really deep pockets, and basically one of my jobs with a bunch of other people was to go around and sign people up, say, look, these guys are going to revolutionize it. They're going to change it. And we opened 100 stores in 100 days. And if you've ever opened a retail anything, doing 100 of them in 100 days is just insane.
That is bonkers.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's, you look at it, you sort of think of Specsavers, particularly in Australia. I know you've got audience probably all around the world, but in Australia, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Every shopping centre you go to, there's a Specsavers. But in 2008, we'd never heard of them.
No, wow.
There was no such thing in Australia. And to go from that to having 45% of the market or whatever it is now that they have was just insane. And yeah, so we did that, and it was the most stressful sort of 3 months ever. But geez, it was the most fun. It was absolutely awesome. It's just juggling and problem solving and doing all of these different things with a really big team and getting people to understand a different concept and to get on board. It was just super fun. And there was something that happened about 5 years into it that I went, I kind of looked around and thought some places should have been really good and they weren't, and other places should have been shit and they were great. And what was the difference? And the difference I found was how well the leaders dealt with stress.
Yeah, interesting.
So if the leaders dealt with stress, if the leaders had read your book and understood that death by comfort isn't going to work and we have to do some uncomfortable things and got better at stress, then no matter what the demographics are, no matter how good their shop was, any of that sort of stuff, their business went well. So I reckon dealing with stress and being really good at that is the sort of secret sauce to business, life, happiness, health, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and you've written.
I'm preaching to the choir.
Yes, you are, but you've also written a couple of books on that, stress Teflon, which I love. I love the idea of stress Teflon, right? That's pretty cool. I don't know about you, but I tell you what, when I read Nicholas Taleb's Anti-Fragile, I'm like, you fucker, you've absolutely nailed it with that word anti-fragile. But I think stress Teflon is as close as you could get to anti-fragile.
Oh, well, that's a big rap to get thrown in the same category as Nicholas Taleb. But it was a cool thing because I actually reckon there's nothing really good in your life that happens without a bit of stress. Yeah, how old were you? You were 40 odd and you went and did boxing.
Yeah, 41. Yeah.
Right. That's a little bit stressful.
Yes. But look, as you know, I'm going to paraphrase the big man Stan, who's been on my podcast a couple of times, clinical psychologist, and he says, we need to walk to the edge of ourselves every now and then and look into the abyss, right?
Wow.
That's what, and it come from Friedrich Nietzsche, but that's really where we grow, around the edge of ourselves and doing stuff that is stressful and stretches us to hell, but doesn't actually break us. But it can become addictive. That's the issue, right?
These things can become addictive. There's another. I read two books back to back. When yours came out, I read Death by Comfort and also read The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which they came out at a very. Have you read that one?
I only read it after my book was released, and then Carly said to me, "Oh Jesus, here's a guy with something that's very, very similar, who was talking about the same thing but just in different ways." And yeah, I did read it. I enjoyed it.
Well, he's actually written another book, just came out recently, called The Scarcity Brain. And one of the things he highlighted, he calls it a scarcity loop. And in a scarcity loop, I think probably a better name for it would be an addiction loop. An addiction loop is availability. You've got the ability to do something. Unpredictable returns. So you don't quite know what's going to happen. And then ability to repeat it. So you think about all of the things that go along with addiction. You get stuff like, booze. It's really available. Unpredictable turns, get 12 beers deep in and see what happens. It's going to be pretty unpredictable. And you can do it again tomorrow night. Yeah, let's do that again. Look at gambling. It's there, I can put it in. But so can challenges and stuff like that. They're unpredictable. You don't quite know what's going to happen, and then you get to do them again. So there's a lot of things that can sort of feed into that unless we have awareness. And I'm a massive believer in, to be stress Teflon, I've kind of, how you put these books out and then you kind of, everything gets tweaked a little bit. The one thing that's really stuck from stress Teflon is there's an ABC to making stress not stick. You got to have awareness of what's going on, what's causing it, what you're doing, what your reactions are. All awareness is massive. Without awareness, nothing changes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
You've got to have belonging. You've got to have the safety of a tribe. All right. We have to have that. If we don't have the safety of a tribe, we're fucked. Yeah. I mean, we got soft skin. We don't run very fast. We've got really little teeth. If we're out in the jungle by ourselves, we're fucked. All right. So we need the safety of a tribe. All right. And we've got to contribute. And this is the one I reckon a lot of people are falling down with. They're actually, if they're contributing, they're not noticing they're contributing. So they're not actually taking notice of the good things we're doing, because we're not really designed to savor the good stuff. We're just designed to sort of stress about the bad stuff. And so I reckon if we've got awareness, belonging and contribution, I think stress doesn't stick. So that's my little ABCs. And it's kind of stood the test of time a little bit.
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of that. Actually, I've never heard anybody talk about that, but I wholeheartedly endorse that. All three of them actually are very, very important. Let's switch over and talk about your book, which I have here, which I would say is one of those rare books that is clever. The way you put things together is very, very clever. It's insightful because it's going to give people insights into themselves and a good understanding of habits. It's also funny. I laughed out loud on lots of different occasions. We fucking have to talk about dopamine lollipops, but it's also it's engaging and most, because you just take the readers on a journey, storytelling, all of that sort of stuff, which is great for engagement, and it's useful, right? Which is very cool as well. So mate, you've got
all those first ones. If they don't have that last one, what's the point of reading a book? All right. If you don't have, if there hasn't got something useful, it's just infotainment.
Yeah, that's right.
I think if you're going to write a book, like Death by Comfort, like Stress Teflon, like Curious Habits, you've got every good book you've ever read. You've got something that's a little takeaway tattoo. I love that idea that if you've got a really good book, you're going to have that takeaway tattoo. And there are times where I went to the osteopath and he gave me a trick on how to do squats better. He put him on these little ramps so I could squat better.
Yeah.
And so I bumped up the weight and I found I could get really deeper on my squats yesterday. And about 5 or 6 into it, because I was going so much deeper, my legs were hurting. And all I could think of, Death by Comfort. Fuck, Paul Taylor would just tell me to just embrace the fact that this hurts. You know what I mean? So little things like that stick with you. And I think if you can write a book, and whether it's dopamine lollipops, whether embracing discomfort, whatever it is, if you can take something away that's your little takeaway tattoo, I think you've written a good book.
Yeah. And look, one of the big things on yours is about being curious. We're both massive fans around being curious. I mean, me and Carly are doing a little series on a life of flourishing, and being curious is one of those things.
A life of flourishing.
Yes, yes,
Can you
indeed.
unpack that for me a little bit?
So it's
Sorry,
more
I'm
the-
going into podcast host mode. Sorry,
yeah,
I
yeah,
forget I'm the
exactly.
guest.
Hey, it's my fucking podcast, mate. I ask the questions. But no, flourishing is that more the Greek eudaimonia, right? Of a life of fulfillment and flourishing, which is much more enduring than happiness. Happiness is a fleeting emotion that comes and goes, but a life of flourishing is much more enduring. And I think that curiosity is absolutely critical to stuff like, you know, curiosity about yourself, why you do things, and we're going to talk about that. Curiosity about others, like why do they do it, rather than just fucking, you know, getting angry at people. Being curious about the way they do it. But for me, being curious about the world, and you know, I bringing up kids, you know, I'm saying to my kids, particularly my 17-year-old who's thinking about her career, I'm saying to her, Kira, you just need to forget about money. You need to get into a career that you are curious about, right? That's something that just fascinates you and piques your curiosity, because then it will be enduring, right? Now, so let's swap over to talking about you. So you talk about curious habits. What are curious habits, and what the hell have the band Megadeth got to do with this?
Oh, I'm not even sure it was Megadeth.
Did I get that wrong? Anyway, rock bands.
Yeah.
Maybe I got that wrong. But what is a curious habit?
A curious habit is something that you've done and you've always done, and it used to serve you, but it doesn't serve you anymore. So, you know, something like attention to detail is a really, really cool thing, right? It's awesome. But, you know, being a perfectionist and not getting anything done because you have to get it perfect and wasting heaps of time and stuff. Perfectionism is a curious habit. Like, that's not helping. You know, chocolate's awesome. Using it as, you know, anxiety medication is, you know, is a curious habit. To actually be aware, okay, I'm having chocolate here because I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling worried. So, you know, chocolate can be a curious habit. I was an optometrist for a lot of years. So I've asked which one's clearer, this one or that one, 9.5 million times. All right. You think your job's boring? Fuck off. It's not. You know, asking the same question 9.5 million times is not the most fun. But there are lots of parts of that job that were really fun. All right. And I forgot where I'm going with that. But
curiosity. It was all about curiosity.
Yeah. So to be able to stop and actually have a look at what you're doing and what you're getting out of it. And what I used to do is by about 2 PM, I'd get really agitated and just, you know, be kind of pissed off because I've been in this 3x3 room all day asking the same questions to lots and lots of people and really busy. And one thing I'd do was go and I'd have a break. I wouldn't actually have a break. I'd just go to Coles and I'd get Pepsi Max and chocolate chip cookies. All right. And I'd eat them and I'd get a sugar and caffeine hit. You know, you're feeling anxious because you're bored out. I think there's burnout and bore out. We can go into that if you like. And when you're bored out, one of the things you'll do is try and get a dopamine lollipop to make you feel good. And so I'm feeling anxious about what I'm doing and I'm not happy that I've been doing this all day, needing a break. And instead of having a break, I ate chocolate chip cookies and Pepsi Max, wondered why I was 115 kilos and wondered why the feeling of feeling good only lasted for about 10 minutes. And then you get the sugar come down and the caffeine doing all everything's doing. So throwing sugar and caffeine on an anxiety fire is probably not the greatest idea in the world. So let's get curious about that. So my feeling anxious was my cue, and my habit loop was to go caffeine and sugar. What else could I do instead of caffeine and sugar that would actually give me a desired result? And so my default loop went this way, caffeine and sugar. Why don't I use that same feeling of being agitated, to being pissed off, all of that sort of stuff, and find something else that will actually help? And what I did was I actually learnt to lie down on the floor in my consulting room. I had a little mat that I'd roll out and I'd lie down on the floor in my consulting room and I'd just breathe into my stomach for like 2 minutes. And so I just stimulated my parasympathetic nervous system, calmed the farm a little bit and did that. Then I stood up and went, oh, that feels great. Mrs. Jones, come on in. And then when I saw Mrs. Jones, instead of being agitated and twitchy and fucking pissed off with the world and not doing a very good job, I was present. I was in my shoes. I was there with her and wanting to help her, which is part of what my job was. And so getting curious about what I'm doing and what I'm getting out of it then turned into, well, what else did I do that would actually get me the desired result? And calming my body system, getting my parasympathetic nervous system working and calming the farm then made me be able to do my job better. And then, but the weird thing with that, you've got to savor it at the end. You've got to save it and sort of say, oh, that feels good having done that. I want to repeat that because that felt so good.
Yeah. And I can't remember who did the research. I read about that savoring something and acknowledging what you've done for about 10 to 12 seconds is what really embeds it into the brain. So that savoring stuff's really important. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about the dopamine lollipops, because I'll often say this, that, you know, people come home and particularly with stress. So it can either be boredom or stress is one of the big drivers of dopamine lollipops. And our brains have worked out to this point how to sort that shit right out, right? I'm stressed.
Really quickly.
Bring me chocolate, or I'm stressed, bring me alcohol. Your brain knows the preferred dopamine lollipop that is going to work. But to your point, a lot of this then starts to become non-conscious, and so much of our behavior is just on autopilot, these things. And sea squirts are... There's a little story that you tell about sea squirts to open your book, which I think plays into these habits and why we do certain things. So can you talk to us about sea squirt and what the hell a sea squirt has got to do with our own brains?
And how the bloody hell it ends up a star of the show in your book is a pretty weird one. A sea squirt's a tiny little thing. It's about an inch long, and it's got a really little brain, about 20,000 neurons. We've got a few more than that. All right. And it swims around the ocean, and it goes towards the places in the water that the water's nice and clean and has nutrients. And it goes away from the part where there's sewage and awful stuff. And so it goes towards the good, away from the bad. Makes sense. All right. And so it doesn't need a really big brain to do that. It then finds a spot where the water's good. It attaches itself to a rock on the sea floor, and it eats its own brain.
Wow.
Decides, I'm not going to change anymore. This is where I am. This is a good spot. I'm just hanging here.
Brain not required.
Brain not required. I actually told that story to I was doing a stress reset with a local council, and told that story, and they've gone, yeah, we've got whole departments of sea squirts. They've been here for years.
Oh, mate, government, Jesus Christ, it's full of sea squirts, right?
Yeah, so... But I think that's the way we're doing our habits. We're doing something that served us at a certain time, all right? But it's not serving us anymore, but we haven't actually reprogrammed our brain. So we haven't actually worked out, this isn't helping us. We haven't got curious. This isn't helping us. What else could I do that would actually be a better option? And your brain takes a little while. You've got to repeat itself a lot of times before you get those neural pathways to become... your default neural pathways, because thought processes are a bit like water and a bit like electricity. They're going to take the path of least resistance. So what we've got to do is build a new path that's actually more obvious than the old one.
Yeah, and I'll often talk about that with people with the way that our brains work and habits. It's like, you know, when you first do something, it's like an animal getting through prime rainforest, right? Primary rainforest, where it's really thick and dense and it's such a friggin' struggle. And then another animal comes along behind it a few minutes later, and it's a little bit easier. And then another one and another one. And after the 1,000th animal has been there, it is now a track through the jungle, and it's the default way that we actually go. And that's it's the same analogy, isn't it?
It's a path of least resistance.
Resistance. But then it becomes the worn path that we just go down. And it's like our thoughts as well. You know, neutral stuff happens, and it'll just go down that path that is well worn in the brain. So the hassle is when that well-worn path is taking you to somewhere that you're actually not getting much out of, you're not benefiting from, and it's not really the place you want to go. We have to get curious and sort of say, I might have to walk through that rainforest again. I might have to go that way, because over there is where the thing I really want is, and I've got to actually forge a new path. And
That's kind of where the grunt zone of habit change comes from.
Yeah, I love this.
I knew you'd like the grunt zone. I
Yeah,
was thinking, who am I talking to? Yeah, Paul Taylor's going to love the grunt zone. That the grunt zone is basically this little section in habit change where you're having to put in more effort and getting less results. So you're putting more effort and I'm getting worse results. This sucks. All right. But you've got to do that because eventually the curve comes up. And once you're not having to put quite so much effort, the results get better and, things improve. So you've got to be able to be curious and know that I'm in the grunt zone here, that things are going to get worse. It's like in a business point of view, you might hire a new colleague. All right. And you've got you've got to do this job. And the grunt zone is you're having to train them and you're having to do stuff. They're taking up a whole bunch of your time. Yeah. But that effort that you put into that new staff member then allows them to do that. And that takes loads off you later on because then they can do this stuff. But it takes you've got to get through that grunt zone of habit change. And that might be, my legs feel sore when I go for a run. Oh, this is terrible. Go for a run a few more times, your legs aren't going to be quite so sore. You're going to strengthen up. Your cardiovascular system's going to be better. And you get through the grunt zone. The hassle is if you don't get through the grunt zone, you don't get the benefit that comes at the other end.
Yeah, mate, I want to double down on this because I really loved that concept of the grunt zone because there's not a lot of people who talk about that. That when you're trying to get a new habit or break an old habit, there is this period where it's really, really hard and you're investing a shitload with very little or minimal or sometimes reverse returns, right? And it's that ability to hang with the tension long enough to see some of those positive outcomes that is just critical. But I think is a habit killer is people not wanting to sit with the discomfort and not wanting to do the work.
Your inner C-squirt doesn't like that stuff, mate. Your inner C-squirt's yelling, nah, let's get out of here. Let's go to this other part that's comfortable and easy and good to do. So, the inner C-squirt is your default reaction. The default thing you want to do is your inner C-squirt. And the hassle is he doesn't like the grunt zone. So you've got to be able to, we're mixing metaphors all over the place here, but it's the thing that you've got to be able to lean into the thing that feels bad, understand that it feels bad, but there's a bigger, better offer at the other end of it. And that's a huge thing, to actually be really clear about what the bigger, better offer at the end of the grunt zone is, will actually get you through it. And sometimes we lose sight of that a little bit.
Yeah, and you talk about, I love this, finding your why brackets without being sick.
That whole American thing of, find your why and that sort of stuff, I just get vomit come up in my throat. It just sounds pathetic, but it's actually really, really true. Well, you've got to find out what one of the things we talk about is the gap and the gain, and there's a bit of where you are now and a bit of where you want to be. There's always a gap there. All right. From here's where I am, here's where I want to be. There's always a gap. And I think that gap's got to have gratitude, acceptance, and purpose. If we're grateful for where we've got to and how we've got there, we accept that this is where I am. Like, say you're 20 kilos overweight, you can kick stones about that and you can whinge and sort of say, oh, it's terrible and all of this sort of stuff. The moment you accept that I'm 20 kilos overweight, my purpose is I want to be old. I want to be fit and old and be able to play with my grandkids. Being 20 kilos overweight doesn't sit with that. So my purpose, I'm actually going to do this because there's a bigger, better offer to not eating the chocolate and laying off the beers a little bit and perhaps not being, eating chips with every meal. The bigger, better offer of that is that I want to be fit and healthy and well and being able to, prosper and flourish like you talked about before in old age. The bigger, better offer of that is way down the track, and your inner C-squirt doesn't like that quite so much.
Yeah, and this is the thing, our brains, as you rightly point out, that the two major drivers of our brain are to minimize danger and maximize reward. And I always
they're not equal though. The minimize danger one is way more prevalent.
Oh, look, absolutely. But you also talk about and saving energy, right? Which I think is really, really important, the things that you're doing. But for people to understand that a lot of people, they think about, okay, I want to reduce my alcohol or reduce my food, or I'm going to exercise. And their big why is that I don't want to get chronic disease 20 years down the track, or my dad died of a heart attack, or my mum's got diabetes, and I don't want to have that. But the thing for people to understand is that is so far away, and our brains have this temporal discounting effect, in that stuff that is far away, we discount the value of that, right? And it can be a very, very powerful driver, particularly when you get people into the emotion of what it would feel like in their future self, which we'll talk a little bit about that. But then, so you have all of that, and you're kind of like, okay, I'm motivated because I don't want to get disease, blah, blah, blah. And then you walk past the friggin' donut shop, and it's right there staring you in the face and hijacking your brain, and it's clear and present reward. So even though minimizing danger is more powerful, if that reward is clear and present, our brains are going to freaking take that every single day of the week, right?
Dopamine lollipops.
Dopamine lollipops. That's the thing. That dopamine lollipop, your brain would much rather have a dopamine lollipop right now than something a shitload bigger down the track. So I think that's where bringing in that whole purpose, values, and I'm going to tell a little story, and I'm going to ask you about yours. So, because I want to make this very real for participants. So for me, I'm a on the way to reforming party boy, right? So for many years, I've given it a fair bit of a nudge. Anybody who knows me, particularly from my university and Navy days, will tell you that, and it's pretty surprising to some people that I'm still alive. But I think for me, the biggest driver of doing all of the exercise, eating well, so if you take our house, Carly is very motivated about healthy eating. She really enjoys it. I don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as her. And one of the big things for me has been a long relationship with alcohol, which I have successfully cut down massively in the last year to 18 months. But
did you read the chapter about Sober Curious?
That was the only one I didn't read, was the Sober Curious one, right? I've read every chapter in your book, because I thought, just because I'm a speed reader, right? And I'm a last minute guy, so I'm whizzing through the book going, fuck, this is awesome. And then I thought, oh, I've kind of got that one. I'll come back to that one, right? But so I'll be interested to see your insights. But for me, the biggest driver of behavior change for me is my deeply held value of authenticity, right? Is that, and I used that when I was doing my boxing. I wanted to get into that ring as an authentic professional boxer. And for me, if I'm standing up talking to people about peak performance and stuff like that, I can't be
drinking a bottle of rum and a dozen beers.
Exactly. And eating shit food. I've got to walk the talk. So that authenticity, and often I've had it written on my bathroom mirror right there in front of me. So I'm curious about you, and what was the driver or the values or the purpose that got you to transform yourself from 115 kilo Luke into what you are now?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a really big one, but I guess that every book you write is me search. You know what I mean? I've written 3 books, and they've all been me search. The stress stuff, yeah, okay. I never really had an issue with stress. I was really good at stress the whole time. It's why I had successful businesses and stuff. But the habits one was, it started with a really simple sentence that a mate of mine said to me, and he said, "No one disappoints me like I disappoint myself." Just have a think about that. And I'm like,
yes.
Fuck, I do that all the time. All right. So get curious about, and that made me get curious about, what am I getting at? You talked about going past a donut shop before. All right. And that instant, you can get a donut, you can have a donut now, dopamine lollipop, sugar, fat, it's the right combination of sugar and fat and stuff. So it's really addictive. Our sort of old brain, our monkey brain, is going to love that. But you don't necessarily have to go to chronic old age and stuff like that. There's a more closer sort of thing that you can think about. How will I feel after I eat this donut?
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like shit.
Yes.
It's like, oh, that's just sat in the stomach. It just feels awful. It feels really nice when you're tasting it, but it's only 5 minutes later it actually feels like shit and isn't good. So you don't have to go to chronic disease and, 20 years down the track. You can actually think, how am I going to feel after this? And really, and shorten that proximity stuff you're talking about, shorten that a little bit and get curious about that. That can definitely help. But basically what I tried to do is work out the things that I was doing. And it's probably a good time to talk about Sober Curious. I was exactly like you. I was definitely a some is good, more is better when it comes to booze. Let's go, let's lead the charge. First to the bar, last to get home. I remember going on a conference and the bouncer wouldn't let me in because I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3" and a big fella, and they don't like pissed big blokes because they're not fun to have in the bar. And he's going, "Oh no, man, you're too drunk. You can't come in." And I said, "Oh, I'm not too drunk. I get way drunker than this." And he's gone. And so he's gone. No, he ended up laughing and letting me in, but. Sober curious is a thing, because what sober curious is, you have a think about booze, and booze has a law of diminishing returns. All right. There's, 3 beers with your mates sitting around having a chat that's my happy place. I love that. It's awesome. Beer 4, maybe after that, you then start bringing in hangovers. The big thing with this, and it hit home when I read a book called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell, that he outlined what actually happens in your brain and what happens to your memory with booze. Because what actually happens at 0.05, you start losing a little bit of short-term memory. And drunk people repeat themselves all the time.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
If you're the reason drunk people tell sober people that they're boring because they don't want to hear the same story 5 times. All right? But drunk people hear it because they've forgotten. At 0.08, you then you can't make new memories quite so well. At 0.15, you don't remember anything. Yeah, you might remember that you had a kebab on the way home, but you can't really remember what car the Uber was. You can't really remember any of the conversations that you had. And it's almost that sort of, what's the point of doing something really fun if you can't actually remember it? Mm-hmm. And that kicks in a lot earlier than you think. We think it's only when you black out and stuff like that, but it actually kicks in a lot earlier. So the analogy I used in the book was, if we could go on a yacht and have supermodels and have the best food and chefs and sail around to exotic places, but at the end we're going to do like that Men in Black thing and take your memory away, would you still want to do it?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I would, because memories are really important. Arthur Brooks talks about, he's a professor from Harvard, and he talks a lot about happiness, and he talks about the difference between pleasure and enjoyment. All right, and pleasure is that donut. You have that donut, you have that beer, and pleasure is good and it's nice, and your sea squirt likes pleasure. But enjoyment has pleasure. It also has people, it also has community, and you're sharing the pleasure with someone, and it also is making memories. All right, so enjoyment is doing something joyful with other people and making memories. Then you've got enjoyment. And I think pleasure and enjoyment, we kind of use the two interchangeably, and they're different. Pleasure is just that thing that feels good in the moment. Enjoyment is the thing that, I'm doing this, I'm part of that community, that sort of belonging thing. I'm with my mates and I'm doing something that's really fun and I'm creating memories. The hassle is, after that beer 4 or 5, you're not creating memories anymore. So you've taken some of that enjoyment away. Are you going to have just as much fun if you have a soda water at beer 4? And yeah, you are. It doesn't change. I have things called soda beers. I actually get my beer bottle and just fill it up with soda water. You just sit there, you just feel like you're having a beer, and I'm having a soda water. So you're wanting to like the fun things of booze, but then wanting to be authentic and stay true to and live your message that you're talking about. Throwing soda beers in there at beer 4 is a great way to do that, because there's a law of diminishing returns. You're not getting much out of beer 5, so why fucking have it?
That's very clever, actually, because you're still doing the action of drinking, which is a big driver. And smokers will tell you a lot of it is about doing stuff with their hands and the long breath out in terms of that. But to come back to smokers and on this point about, because you're absolutely right, it's about not thinking about the long term, but how you're going to feel, right? And that's a
Mm,
positive and a negative. Habits that you want to stop, like not doing the donut, is focusing on how I'm going to feel afterwards. Or exercise, fucking hell, forget about that's going to enhance your longevity. How does that shit make you feel? Like, how
mm.
awesome do you feel
No one's ever
afterwards?
got back from a run and said, "Oh, geez, I wish I didn't do that run."
I know I regret that work unless they got injured, right? But
Yeah.
nobody goes. I regret that I did that exercise or whatever it may be. But hypnotists, and I don't know if it was Alan Carr or whoever it was, but when people were smoking, it gets them to visualize all of that smoke doing really nasty shit to their body, right? And he's successfully hypnotized people that have a chocolate addiction, that they imagine that when they're eating chocolate they're actually eating shit, and trying to make it feel like it, but that bringing that in about the negative consequence as you're doing it. So as you're eating that donut, every bite of this is going to make me feel shithouse, right? This fructose that's coming in is destroying my liver and destroying my cells. Like it takes the fun away big time,
Mm.
but that can be something that's a tool that people can actually leverage off, right? So that then brings
I,
me in.
I love that idea. And I actually read Alan Carr's How to Stop Smoking. I've never smoked in my life, but I read it. Another great person for smoking cessation is a guy called Judson Brewer, who's I think he's at Princeton. And Judson Brewer talks about the bigger, better offer. And one of the things he talks a lot about, he wrote a book called The Craving Mind. All right. And basically, what he did with smoking, his smoking cessation things are about 8 times better than the gold standard. So
Wow.
his Craving to Quit is the app that he uses to stop smoking. All right. And it's really, really good. No, he did a course that was about how to coach mindfulness-based behavior change. And I did his course that he ran, and he was just amazing. Really, really nice bloke, and it was a really good course. But basically what he did is, instead of actually saying, this chocolate is shit, to be able to just get curious and just sort of
Mm.
inhale the smoke and, how does that taste? How does that feel in my lungs? All of that sort of stuff. And let's face it, smoking tastes like crap, and it's,
Mm.
makes your breath stink and makes your hands stink, and it's awful. So to get curious about that, I love the idea of being curious, not judgmental. Ted
Yeah, yeah,
Lasso
yeah.
brought that up in one of the Ted Lassos, which is just one of the greatest shows of all time. I love it. But he said, be curious, not judgmental. And I think with your habits, I reckon we should start with curiosity.
Mm.
Because the moment we start with judgmental, we start beating ourselves up and say, I told you I was shit, and all of that sort of stuff. And all of that sort of negative reinforcement can backfire on you. But curiosity doesn't backfire.
Yeah, that is a very good point, actually. And so I'm very happy to be stand corrected around that. Yeah, is rather than that negative stuff, be curious. That I like that. So I'm
Curious,
gonna
not judgmental, man. I want
yes.
that on a t-shirt somewhere, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You need to have that on a t-shirt.
it's such a good line. And even, you meet someone and it's really easy to be judgmental. And
Mm.
one of the things I do a lot in my workshops and stuff that I run is I teach a thing called catch, wait, and reset. And it's a really cool thing for behavior change. And it's to catch the thing that you're doing. Wait stands for, what am I thinking? What am I trying? Who am I talking to? And then reset's the same as your computer, Control Alt Delete. What can I control? What are my alternatives? What do I need to get rid of? And to be able to catch yourself being judgy, I think is a
Mm.
really, really cool thing to be able to, particularly with people.
Yeah.
Although Abraham Lincoln had a quote that I really loved, and he said, "I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better."
Oh, that's cool.
That is gold,
That's
isn't it? That's a
cool.
200-year-old quote. That's 200-plus-year-old quote. And it's, I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better. And that's what
That
curiosity is all about. We judge people really, really quickly, and we judge them on very small amounts of information about their world and what's going on. How can we stop that? And particularly from a business point of view, teaching leaders how to be curious, not judgmental, and not to know everything. The fact that you had an idea, you said it to me, and I said, well, I perhaps don't agree with that. I think it's more like this. And you've gone, yeah, I think that's better. And you've changed your
Mm,
mind.
yeah.
You know, there's a curiosity there. But one of the things that a lot of people can do, particularly as we get older and particularly as we get higher up in whatever business and stuff we're doing, is there's a thing called earned dogmatism. And earned dogmatism is where, because I'm an expert at this, what I think is right, and I actually close my mind off to other things. And I think that's a really cool thing to actually catch doing that as well. I'm
Mm.
catching being closed-minded to this. How is, you might say Donald Trump's an arsehole, Donald Trump's this and that. What things did Donald Trump do that were actually quite good? And I don't know enough about American politics to know what that is, but he might have done some stuff that was awesome. But we've closed it off and we've stopped being curious. So it puts us, it creates false dichotomies that aren't there. We can actually, when we get curious, we can look at things from different angles and sort of see how else we can look at it. And then what we're doing is we're choosing our choice rather than taking a default. And I think the problem is we take the default road, we take that path through the rainforest that's been, lots and lots of animals have taken, whether that's where we want to go and whether that's the results we want. Where do we stop and sort of say, okay, what's a better option here?
Yeah, that is awesome. I love that, curious, not judgmental, and the Abraham Lincoln quote. Fucking hell, that's brilliant. So let's now. So that curiosity, really, really important. Like, why am I doing this habit? How is this serving me? What could be better? Then,
what am I getting out of it?
Yeah, what am I getting out of it? What? And I'm going to tell a little story here because it reminds me of as a mate of mine, Gary Davis. I did a lot of work with Ballarat City Council years ago. Gary was the head of HR and then became a mate of mine. But we were talking about habits. I did stuff around behavior change and just that optimacy of habits, right? And then trying to replace an action to get the same outcome. And Gary then realized, he said that he had a habit of drinking half a bottle of red wine every single night. And when he would come home, he realized that his cue or his trigger was at 6 o'clock. And it was like, ding, something going off in his head. It's wine o'clock. And he would sit and he would drink a half a bottle of wine. But he had the discipline just to stay to half a bottle. And he's saying to himself, it's okay. I'm only drinking half a bottle.
The hassle is at that half a bottle of wine, that's like 3 or 4 standard drinks in half a bottle of wine. The part of your brain that would normally, that top-down control, that your new brain I talk about, the prefrontal cortex, is the bit that makes you do the hard thing when the hard thing's the right thing to do. The hassle is that half a bottle of wine in, that part of your brain's gone offline. Yeah. And the fact that he could actually limit it to the half a bottle is actually a really cool thing because most people can't.
No, absolutely. But Gary then realized that this was just an automatic behavior. So from some of the stuff that we talked about exercise. So he went, right, okay, what I'm going to do is at 6 o'clock, I'm going to do a very short workout. And he would just go into his garage and he would do a very short workout and get the feel good factor out of the exercise. And he said it was doing that broke that habit. He said it didn't work every single time, but it was a replacement behavior to get a same outcome of feeling good and reducing the stress of the day that then helped him to crack that habit. So you then talk in your book about doing habit swaps, right? And I think it's what
you've just described one beautifully.
Yeah,
that's a big thing because one of the things that happens, and you talk a lot about health and fitness and all of that sort of stuff. And one of the things that happens, if can I nerd out for a little bit? Your audience is like nerding out a little bit. You think about the stress response, and your stress response is there's a few. Everything's going to happen. Your heart rate's going to go faster. You're going to breathe more. Your blood pressure's going to go. All of those fight or flight things are going to happen. One of the big things that happens in the stress response is your liver dumps sugar into your blood system. All right, your sugar spikes. Every few months.
Can I just interject on that? So I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor.
I was just about to talk about that. I've worn them for ages. And one of the things about them is that when you go and present and you go and talk from stage a lot, same as what I do, my sugar levels went up to like 10 and 11 when I'm presenting from stage because it's nervous and you're excited and all of that sort of stuff. And your sugar spikes from stress are actually as high or higher than eating Mars bars.
Mate, the highest sugar spike that I have had in the last week since I did a CGM a while ago, and then I did it again. I put it on about a week ago, and I've been playing with stuff and you know, it's going, well, all right, let's try this sort of treaty food and see what happens to my blood sugar. The biggest blood sugar spike that I have had being in a dentist chair.
Wow.
I was fucking and I'm not that bad being in the dentist chair, but I was getting a crown done, and I came out of the dentist and I looked at it, and my blood sugar was 8.9. I'm like, fucking hell,
I
that
haven't
is
eaten anything.
mental. I haven't
Yeah, it's
eaten
crazy.
anything, and it went whoa, way up. So yes, sorry, I just wanted to interject that. So you're saying yes?
No, it was exactly where I was
stress.
going. That these things that I fast a lot. I'll do a hard reset every year where I go and live in a teepee and I fast for 5 days and I have no technology and no
cool.
people and all of that sort of stuff. So death by comfort. To do those things that are really hard, but one of the things is that having that glucose monitor on, one of the things you notice is that when I've been really, really stressed, you're agitated, you don't feel good, you want to feel comfortable straight away. You want that stress levels to come down. And one of the things that we do is we go to food and booze. And what food and booze do is we've got a really elevated sugar level from all the stress, and then we're chucking sugar on top of it. We're then getting a massive insulin spike. We're then having big sugar drops, and we're going on the roller coaster then. But we're going up and down. And as your sugar levels are dropping, your willpower and your ability to say no and that top-down control from your new brain goes out the window. And we end up on the roller coaster of sugar, and that way we end. And that's where a lot of the obesity is coming from. The insulin resistance and stuff that goes along with having too much sugar in your system is actually exacerbated as much, if not more, by stress. So what we've got to do is make sure we do what your mate does and go and do the calm the farm and get your sugar levels back down, burn off a little bit of that sugar that your liver will reabsorb it when you calm down. All right. But the hassle is if you put sugar in on top of that. So one rule of thumb you can use really easily is I'm not going to eat until I've fully calmed down.
I like that. That's
all right.
That's
until my sugar levels, my pulse rate, till I've done my meditation, till I've taken the dog for a walk, burnt off some of that sugar, and then my sugar levels are coming back to normal. If I want to eat, then I will. But one of the things is you don't necessarily have to eat then, because you're eating for comfort and you're already comfortable because you've actually sorted your shit out by some other means. You've done a habit swap, like your mate's done when he went and did the short amount of exercise instead of half a bottle of red.
Yeah.
So to work out, and that's what Curious Habits is all about, to sort of say, what are my cues that get me started on this thing? What am I getting out of it? And what are my other options? And when you do that, then you choose the option that's actually going to serve you. You savor the fact, wow, that felt great. I really love the fact I took the dog for a walk instead of having those 5 beers. And then all of a sudden, what you're doing then is you're changing habits that are actually serving you. They're not coming from a place of scarcity and lack and, oh no, I can't drink. You know, that idea of I want to drink less. If you go into that thing and I can't drink anymore, I've got to drive and I hate this, you're going to hate it. If you go into it with, I love having 3 beers, but that's all I love because I don't get anything out of it, then you do it because you want to do it. And I think that's the key to curiosity and habit change, that you change the habit and you change to a habit that you want and not from a place of scarcity and lack and I'm not good enough. And if we do that, it just takes the stress out of habit change. And taking the stress out of habit change means the new habits stick and you haven't got that resistance. You haven't got that Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill for behavior change. For it to just roll back down. So every now and then I let the boat out a little bit and I might have more than 4 or 5 beers, but not very often. And I just have no desire to have that 5th beer anymore.
Yeah, that's very cool.
There's something about that. Doing it because you want to do it is a way more effective way to change your habits than doing it because you have to.
Yeah, and I think that little celebration at the end is really, really important and
massively important.
Blow
a bit of sunshine up your own ass, make it feel good. I mean, this is. Nature's known this for a while. If orgasm felt like slamming your dick in a car door, we wouldn't have many humans in the world, would we? Right? Orgasm feels good because it makes us want to do it again because we want to keep this species going. You know what I mean? And there's a whole other things that might not feel quite so nice, but It's pretty important.
So, mate, tell us how Carlos can help us.
Carlos, we invented Carlos a long time ago. I'm shit ass at DIY. Do you want the long story or the short one?
Yeah, just give me whatever tickles your fancy.
I'm shit ass at DIY, man. I just fuck shit up all the time. Like, you know, I just wreck stuff. Mate asked me to come and help him put a TV on. Measured it up, you know, stud finder, here's the stud, here's the spirit level, everything's right, ready to go, drilling holes. Last hole I drill in, I go straight through a hot water pipe and hot water pissing out everywhere. Like, shit, don't turn it off. I'm awful. I'm just, you know, my wife calls me Bob the Breaker. I'm fucking hopeless. And we had a holiday house in Byron. And there was this big tree there, and we couldn't get the grass to grow. And we wanted to use the backyard a bit better, so I decided I'm going to build a deck, and couldn't get tradies because in Byron everyone's stowed and no one wants to actually work. So I decided I'm going to build this deck myself. So I got a post hole digger and I got a concrete made. I worked out with joists and bearers and all, and I built a deck. And this is a 6.5 meter deck. It was only that far off the ground, so it wasn't too hard. But the deck was awesome. But it happened to be November, and I have a really long gap between my nose and my lips. So I had this big, dirty, hairy caterpillar hanging off my lip, and I looked like Carlos, the Colombian drug dealer. and we're all having beers and wines and stuff on this deck. Everyone was a bit tentative standing on it at the start, but it was all okay. And one of the girls said, I'm glad you got rid of your old husband. Luke was a gumpy, but this Carlos bloke, this Colombian drug dealer you've got is really, really good. And so Carlos became my alter ego. He became the better version of me. And since then in my coaching practice and when I do workshops and stuff, one of the things we do is work out what your trademark traits are, what your infinite goals are, and to know exactly, you know, one of yours is going to be authenticity. All right. Yeah. But to actually come up with what are you like at your best? What are your, you know, I like the term trademark traits.
Yeah.
And mine is I'm curious, creative, and generous. So if I'm being curious, creative, and generous, I'm as happy as a pig in shit.
Yeah.
All right. And I think about it. I've been married 28 years now. All right. And if my wife and I aren't getting on and we're arguing and our relationship isn't good. All right. Am I turning up as Carlos? Am I being curious about her point of view? Am I being creative about finding a solution that we both like? Am I being generous with my time and my energy? And almost invariably, if we're not getting on, the best version of her and the best version of me get on like a house on fire. So the only time we're not going to get on is if the best version of me is not turning up. And when you're really clear about what the best version of you looks like, it's really, really clear to know whether it turns up or not.
Yeah.
And so Carlos it's a really cool thing. On my website at lukemathers.com.au, you can actually download a worksheet and you can actually work out your Carlos, what your trademark traits are. It's a really cool process.
Yeah.
But to also know what little Luke looks like. And you know that sort of, you know, those old cartoons with the angel on one side and the devil on the other. You know what I mean? You've got to know what your devil sounds like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I reckon your devil pops up after about the third rum or the fourth rum, and that little Paul's going to say, let's go hard.
Yes. Mate, I
have little Luke who's the sort of... Go for it, mate.
No. Sorry, I was going to say, we have exactly the same concept. Me and Carly talk about your gremlin and sage. And that
yes, the gremlin and sage. Yes, I forgot about that.
It's the exact same thing, and you know, my sage is Jev, and when I'm struggling or faces a challenge, like what would Jev do right now?
I forgot about that.
The other question is that we ask is, what would I do right now to express the characteristics of Jev? So it's those trademark behaviors, right? Yeah. We're in violent agreement on this because this shit works, right?
It does.
Works.
I forgot all about that because it was the guy from Vietnam, the Hanoi Hilton guy, Epictetus, and Viktor Frankl were your three things that made up Jeff.
Yeah,
is that right?
Look at you. That's pretty awesome.
James, I can't remember the
Jim Stockdale. Jim
Stockdale, that's it.
Yeah.
I remember reading that and thinking, fuck, this is Carlos. And then going, that's so much better way to do it, to pick three people and use an acronym for their name. I love it.
But I do like your Carlos story, mate, and the handlebar moustache. That is pretty brilliant, mate. We are going to wind up, but I just want to talk one last thing. I want to talk about because it's dear to my heart: toxic positivity versus brutal optimism, which I would call realistic optimism. Just give us a little, give us your 2-minute rant.
Oh, mate. Toxic positivity is just Pollyanna. Everything's got to be awesome. It's got to be awesome. If it's not awesome, go away. All right. But brutal positivity is that thing where you say, all you've got to do is this and everything's going to be great. And it's like, 5-minute abs. All you've got to do is 5-minute abs. And if you do 5-minute abs, you're going to have 6-pack. Chunk, 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 chunk. And when you don't get the 6-pack and chunk, 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 you beat yourself up, you tell yourself you're a piece of shit, and it's awful. And that's what brutal optimism's about. That idea that, you can do this really easy thing and you'll get these great results. And most of the time it's bullshit. And then you beat yourself up because you didn't get the results you want and you blame yourself for it. And marketing does it all the time. If you buy this BMW, you'll be the happiest person in the whole entire world. And no, you won't. The shit in your life is still going to be there no matter how nice a car you drive is. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we have this tendency to sort of dilute everything down. If you do this one thing, everything will sort itself out. And that's what brutal optimism is all about. That idea that this one thing will change all of my world. No, it won't. And to get curious about that and do things because you want to do them, not because you have to, I reckon, is my big takeaway for changing habits. I want to change this habit and I'm not going to push a rock uphill to do it. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. And if you do that, savor the good things, set up your environment so it's easy, all of that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of tips in Curious Habits that you can take it through. And I've basically got all the habit books and I've read them all and basically worked out where's all the good shit to put in there and how can I add a little bit of Luke in there. And yeah, read Curious Habits. You'll love it.
That was my take on your book, is that you've read every friggin' stuff that has been written about habits, because I've read a shitload of them as well, but you have pulled it all together beautifully and you've put a shit heap of Luke in there, right? To really bring it to life in a way that other habit books do not bring it to life. But I'm going to add one thing. As you were talking about that whole idea about being curious and doing it for the reason you want. You talked about brutal optimism. It just reminded me, I think something to add into that process around curious habits is the Stockdale paradox, right? Which is realistic optimism, where and it came out of the Hanoi Hilton and Jim Stockdale when he said to the guys, when he realized he was the senior officer in there, he said, "Gentlemen, steel yourselves 5 years at least. This is going to be more horrendous than most of us can imagine, and no one will make it through this alone. However, if we are united and if we back each other to the hilt, if we're there for each other, we not only will we survive, but we will return home with our honor intact." And that realistic optimism is where you need to hold two seemingly opposable things in your mind at the same time. One is that you need to confront the most brutal aspects of your reality, whatever they might be. And at the same time, you need to have an unswerving belief that you will prevail in the end, no matter what the circumstance. So a lot of people listening to this, I think you need that. Fucking hell, this is going to be hard, right? If I'm going to lose 20 kilos or if I'm going to get off the booze or whatever, this is going to be friggin' hard. There's going to be pain. There's going to be suffering. I'm going to have to stay in the get shit done zone. I'm going to have to bring Carlos. However, if I do this, this is all the benefits that will be. And then throwing all of your shit there about being curious and stuff like that, I think can just bring it all together really, really nicely.
You can change without the resistance. That idea that it's going to be really, really hard. Yeah, parts of it will be. But if you're changing because you want to change and it's part of your identity and you set up your environment so it's easier to change and you have the right cues and habits and use the cues to do the thing that's actually going to serve you, it does take a lot of that resistance away. And it's not quite as brutal as the Hanoi Hilton, but habit change doesn't have to be that hard. All right. So I'm going to push back on you a little bit that it doesn't have to be that hard. And if we can go into it with the right attitude, and I'm doing this as an act of love for myself rather than an act of, scarcity and an act of I'm not good enough. I think we're going to be in a lot better position to actually change because we want to change. And I think that's our goal. We want to turn up this person. I want to be this version of Paul Taylor that turns up, and that's his authentic. And he has those characteristics of Jev. That he's accepting, all of that sort of stuff. And if you're turning up as that, I actually don't think it's that hard. I don't think it's a Hanoi Hilton. I don't think it's going to be that difficult because you're doing it because you want to do it. And when you want to do it, those things become a lot easier. And it's not brutal optimism. I'm not saying that it's, it's 5-minute abs and you're going to have a 6-pack and, look like, a rock star. But if you're doing it because you want to do it, it definitely takes the resistance away from it.
Now, absolutely doing stuff because you want to rather than you feel like you should and you get sucked up by the tyrannies of the should.
The tyrannies of should.
Yeah, you should all over yourself, right? So many people that are just covered in their own shoulds. So mate, look, this has been awesome, as is your book, and I'm actually now going to go and get your other books because I love your writing style and how you bring everything together and do it with a fair dose of humor and lookism and with a very useful outcome. So where can people go? So LukeMathers.com, Mathers. .com.au. Any other places, any socials or stuff, or is everything just in the website?
Luke Mathers _speaker in LinkedIn, and all of that other Instagram, Facebook and stuff. Couldn't give a flying fuck about any of it because it's the most toxic shit you're ever going to see in your whole entire life. All of it's just got compare and despair vomited all over it. I don't want a bar of it, so I can't very well go and pace myself all over that shit and then sledge it. So I'm not very good at that stuff.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. Mate, you are a bloke who is just brimming with authenticity. I love it. Great stuff. Thanks, mate.
As are you, buddy. It's great talking to you, Paul. It's been fun.